Hello, we're Meaningmaking, telling our stories with the conviction that you're a story too.
My name's Andy Griffiths.
And my name's Imogen.
And this is now the fifth in a series of conversations about making meaning. We're hoping to tell the story of lockdown and emergence in ways that help other people tell their stories too. And we are really excited to be joined by the Rev Tim Goode today.
Yes, welcome, Tim. Tim is the rector of St Margaret's Lee in South East London, and since 2013 has been disability advisor for the Southwark Diocese. He's also a member of the National Disability Task Group, which advises the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, and he sits on General Synod.
Tim, thank you for joining us. So our first question is just, how do you tell the story of lockdown?
Well, for us, the lockdown was started before it happened. I was very fortunate in that one of our members of our standing committee is a surgeon at Great Ormond Street. And so we had a standing committee a good 10 days, maybe 2 weeks before lockdown. And at the start of the meeting, I said, so what is your view about what may happen in the future? We knew what was happening in Italy and in Spain, but it was not really clear that that was going to happen to us. And he made it absolutely clear what was about to happen. And so we actually had a period of time before lockdown to get ourselves prepared. And we did. So I actually started doing online worship way ahead of the lockdown. And it afforded me the opportunity to actually speak to my parish and share what we were pretty sure was going to happen. And as the future unfolded, it is exactly what did happen. Virtually, I mean, what I was shared at that meeting was pretty much exactly what happened. So we actually were able to hit the ground running in the case of the lockdown. And so we were able to share immediately both morning and night prayer. We were able to set up support groups, and we had members of the congregation all prepared to contact all of those who are vulnerable and all of those who are in any of the shielding categories, and to ensure that they were being cared for. And then we opened that up to the wider parish as well. And so we actually had the systems in place ready to go. And that proved to be greatly appreciated. And it meant that right from the start, we got a real sense of community, a real sense of working together, and a real sense of reaching out and serving the community right at the point of anxiety, shock, and real fear. So that was really fortunate for us. So we didn't have that sort of moment of trying to catch up with events. We were actually well ahead of the events happening.
But Tim, I know that for you, it was quite challenging because you were shielding even from your wife, is that right? What happened in your household? Do you mind sharing what you had to go through?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, firstly, she's a Scouser, so it's sensible to shield anyway. But actually, she is a teacher, and so if you remember, there was a week before the schools actually shut down, and when I had already started shielding, and then there was the week after the schools had shut where we had to continue the social distancing. So we had a period of 2 weeks where we had to be 2 meters apart from each other the whole time. And that really, that was hard. That was really hard, but it was also a really revelatory experience. I mean, it also took us both back to my time of illness, and the lockdown took us both back to my time of illness. I spent 6 months in hospital, and part of that time I was in infection control, and so was absolutely being shielded from everybody. And so anyone who visited me had to wear PPE and couldn't come close. So there was a memory of it, though of course at that time I was seriously ill and so wasn't really capable you know, of reciprocating any affection that Bernie wished to express. Whereas here, you know, the lockdown, that initial, even though we were prepared, it was seriously anxiety inducing, and not being able to be physically present to one another was really hard. And it was a real important lived experience of what is the state of so many people's lives, actually. And I know this from my disability work, of people who are not able to be physically present to one another. But it also drew serious attention to the fact, to actually issues around human sexuality. And actually that the church demands of our priests that they cannot be physically intimate with one another, and how costly that is, and how that actually has the potential to really impact on one's loving relationship. So on a whole range of different areas, it's an experience actually I'm very grateful for, in opening up for me more that world and my means of being empathetic within my ministry to that. But it was not easy at all.
No, that's really, really helpful. And I know that you've done lots of theological reflection on your own time of illness. I wonder what bits of the Bible you're going to now to help you frame your experiences over the last 6 months.
The narrative of Thomas meeting Christ has actually been one of the formative passages. And I think this has been something that the church has found really, really difficult. And I think this shines a light onto one of the problems that the church has struggled with during this lockdown. Because I think one of the callings of the church is to fully engage with the incarnated Lord, the Lord who is both fully divine and fully human. And that finds its ultimate physical representation in the risen body of Jesus Christ. And I believe that the Christian church, pretty much since the resurrection, really has focused on the deity of the risen body and has balked at really engaging in the humanity of the risen body, and therefore engaging with our vulnerabilities, actually acknowledging that we have vulnerabilities, accepting them, and ultimately loving them. And the narrative of Thomas is that Jesus invites him to gaze at his humanity, gaze at his wounds that are not healed. And Thomas's response is quite extraordinary. His response is, "My Lord, my God." And I think one of the real challenges for the church in this lockdown has been to accept the invitation to gaze upon the open wounds of Christ, and for our integrated and genuine response to be, my Lord, my God. Because I feel that the church instinctively balks at looking at the open wounds of Christ. And it is profoundly uncomfortable with gazing upon them when it is forced to do so. And certainly to respond with my Lord, my God is something that I think the church has just failed to do. So that has been a really instructive passage for me about what the church has been really challenged to do.
And what would it look like for the church to gaze on the humanity of the risen body then?
I think it would profoundly transform the church's understanding of identity and image. And I mean, there's not a long enough time to go into that in detail. But if I was to put it in a pithy phrase, I would say that sitting at the right hand of the Father is a disabled man in human terms, but in God's terms is perfection. And the challenge that the church has is to shift from the human understanding to the God understanding of perfection. And God's understanding is revealed through the risen body of Jesus Christ, which is profoundly holy, divine, and profoundly vulnerable and human. And so the Christian journey is a journey of entering into our vulnerabilities and ultimately loving them. And that's the journey of ultimate liberation.
So it's easy for people like me to say, oh, we should be learning from our disabled brothers and sisters. And I just mean they're better at doing online church than the mainstream church has typically been. So we need to learn a thing or two from that. You're saying it goes much, much deeper.
Yes, I'm saying that, I mean, this is absolutely the heart of Paul's theology of the body. And that actually when God gazes at socially defined as disabled people, he doesn't see disabled people. He sees people made in the image and likeness of God, loved, valued, and profoundly important.
Is that you, Andy? Is that me?
Well, there we go. I mean, that's the great thing about conversations that go off script, isn't it?
So, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. That was really, really, really fascinating and really helped me see something else about our humanity and what God is like. So thank you so much. Andy and I are going to continue having conversations like this. And you can find the whole project on meaningmaking.card.co, and card is spelt with a double R, C-A-R-R-D.
And our next conversation is going to be with Dr. Isabel Hamley, who is the chaplain to the Archbishop of Canterbury. Thank you very much. Tim, before we finish though, is there a final thing that you would wish for abled Christians like Imogen and me to hear and take seriously about the story of lockdown and the situation that we're in right now?
I would this is as a plea to the church, corporate, and that is that we say in the common worship introduction to baptism, in God we have a new dignity, and God calls us to fullness of life. Please, church, live out that promise you're making to every single human being who comes to baptism. Because not everyone is treated with dignity, and not everyone is afforded the flourishing, the fullness of life. The calling of the church is to fully invest in the flourishing of the other.
Thank you.